Hello and welcome to Diggers Outdoors. Today we are going to be talking about ley lines. What are they? And I was hoping to have some people up here because this is a subject that I am not very versed in. Put a couple invites out. Nobody got here. Hey, Uncle Al. Nobody's got here as of yet, but a couple people that I know could shed a little bit more light on it, or maybe point the rest of us in the right direction from their standpoint. But hey, it's all good. Um, we'll start off with what exactly ley lines are. Um, almost every page, I looked at about 4 pages. The best explanation I got was from, believe it or not, Wikipedia. And all 4 or 5 pages I looked at that had an explanation that went on kept on circling around itself and kept on talking about everything but the ley lines, including the Wikipedia page. But with that in mind, I'm going to read the Wikipedia page to you and we'll go from there. Okay, ley lines are straight alignments drawn between various historic structures and prominent landmarks. The idea was developed in early 20th century Europe, with ley line believers arguing that these alignments were recognized by ancient societies that deliberately erected structures along them. Since the 1960s, members of the Earth Mysteries movement and other esoteric traditions have commonly believed that such ley lines demarcate Earth energies and serve as guides for alien spacecraft. Archaeologists and scientists regard ley lines as an example of pseudo-archaeology and pseudoscience. The idea of leys as straight tracks across the landscape was put forth by the English antiquarian Alfred Watkins in the 1920s. Particularly in his book, The Old Straight Track, he argued that lines could be drawn between various historic structures, and these represented trade routes created by ancient British societies. Although he gained a small following, Watkins' ideas were never accepted by the British archaeological establishment. In fact, that frustrated him. His critics noted that his ideas relied on drawing lines between sites established at different periods of the past. They also argued that in prehistory, as in the present, it was impractical to travel in a straight line across a hilly or mountainous areas of Britain, rendering his leys unlikely as trade routes. Independently of Watkins' ideas, a similar notion, that of Heilige Leinen, holy lines, was raised in 1920s Germany. And then from there, it just starts going round and round and round about everybody but the lines itself. Hey, what's up, Laura? Hey, Chris. Yeah, and the whole thing about it is there has to be something to it. Hey, Josh. Um, I'm not saying there has to be something to it. There could be some pseudoscience, but the ancients weren't as dumb as people think they were. A case in point, if you look at the pyramids, at the Pyramid of Giza, there's the Great Pyramid, there's the three little ones, and one's kind of offset from the other ones. That, to the degree and the angle and the way it sits on the earth, is the perfect alignment of Orion's belt. That kind of symbolizes Orion's belt, those three little pyramids. So Orion, the constellation, has been noticed throughout not only our time, but antiquity and beyond. They recognize that as something. So the idea that I'm not saying that Earth energies so much, but a definite direction to build structures, maybe in a line or a orientation or a bearing, is not out of the question. Yeah, somebody just came home. My dog's throwing a fit, so don't mind him. So, so you see exactly what I'm. So you know what I'm saying, or what? Yeah, it is Uncle Al, but bear with me here because I'm going to try digging into this a little bit deeper. I'm going to let Zeus get done doing what he's doing. I'm probably going to shut the door here in a little bit too. But with that in mind, a lot of these sites were mystical or religious or had some kind of supernatural background to them of some sort, whether it be legend, folklore, what have you. Um, because, like from Stonehenge, hang on here. Say hi to Dad. He's giving my dog some bonies. I have heard that, but there's nothing really to suggest that. There's not enough in the pyramids to actually create the circuitry. Um, Now, there has been groundwater. They found groundwater in a couple of them, which would be one of the things that you would need. Give me 1 second. I'm going to shut the door here. But yeah, with the theory that the pyramids were electrical plants, they were definitely something. But electrical plant, I don't think so. But in about the same era in Baghdad, they found the quote Baghdad batteries, which were an actual battery. People have reconstructed them, but that's kind of going off this, well off this subject. Um, Getting into these mystical or magical sites and folklore, legend, and a lot of these sites are standing sites. They are archaeological sites. Um, you can draw a straight line from Stonehenge to like the mount. I can't remember the mountains, but mountains in Europe that were mystical, and the line goes right down the main ridge of mountains through another site. I think it was the site in France where they found the prehistoric cave paintings through the pyramids of Giza, and I think there's a couple points on beyond that in that one line. So there's something there. Connecting the line from one to another is happenstance. You can do that anywhere. You get to the line, that's a coincidence. You get more than four. Now you're looking at a trend. That's just the way I see it. I could be wrong. And it could be something simple, again, as I said, as a bearing. They're lying, when they built these, they were honoring a star, because back then they didn't have calendars. The stars above them was their calendar. So as these things went around, like Stonehenge uses the equinoxes, the summer winter solstice, and a few other dates that certain things line up through those arches. What's up, Blue? So there's all of that going on too. Um, but let me go to share screen. I have about 2 or 3 different maps here, and you'll see what I am talking about. And it's some of these maps get rather interesting. Go to window. We're going to go to the first one here. Let me get back to this. Okay, and the first one, yes, it is a weather channel, but I think this person used this map because they copied it online to see what's. I hear you, Lou. But they used this map, and it's a more modern version of ley lines because a lot of these lines, because I kind of checked them against the other maps, and they're fairly close. The other 2 maps I have are completely different as well. So not everybody agrees where these ley lines go. What I was using for a comparison is if you look over here on Pennsylvania, Ohio, that line that comes down through Pennsylvania into Ohio, that line is present on all 3 maps that I'm going to show you, including this one. And that line in PA actually comes right down through the middle of Beaver County here, right where I live. And it comes down and like the lower third of Ohio, comes in about mid-eastern Ohio, goes out just down below southwestern Ohio, goes out of Ohio and keeps on going. And by the way this is looking, it is a minor line. It's not a major ley line, it's a minor ley line. So, and I'm just using the United States. I'm not going to use the world because you could start historical sites all over the place. But looking at this, what I'd be interested to see is and once the weather warms up here just a touch more, I'm going to be going back out to it. I may have found a Indian. I did find an Indian artifact. Most people know the artifacts there, but I think the artifact itself is sitting on top of a mound. What I want to know is how close that line goes to that mound, which I think that would be very interesting to figure that out. But looking at this, I said this is a more modern interpretation. So I'm going to jump out of this one here and go into the next one. Share screen. That'll be lines 2. Now this one's a little bit more. I have a GPS, Uncle Wow. Hey Capone, how you doing? Now this one's just a little bit more interesting, and I did not find a explanation of what the circles are. If they're sites, if there's red and there's black circles on there. So I don't know if they're sites, and red means one type of site, black is a different type of site. But there's a couple things on here that I found rather interesting. The first one is if you look down off the coast of Florida, where that little circle is there off the coast of Florida, and you'll see what I'm talking about in the next map. If I'm not mistaken, that is where they found the quote unquote Bimini Road. Some of these other circles, I kind of recognize some of these places. Let me see. There is one up here between up around Buffalo, up on Lake Erie. There's one. In fact, I think the one up here in Michigan. I think those are where the ancient Native American copper mines were. And if just a few more, like I think the one right above Louisiana, I think that's Cahokia. But if you follow these rays out, these lines out, they intersect more than one historical site. So as I said, it's not really three is like a coincidence. Anything more than three, then you start looking at a trend. Hey, Kaylin, how you doing? So it'd be interesting. And a lot of these historical sites are from different eras. They're not all from the same era. They're from different eras. Um, like with the quote unquote Bimini Road. Um, yeah, those are ley lines, Kaylin. Um, one thing people have to keep in mind, especially with the bit, I'm not. They said it's a natural formation, but it's too organized being natural formation in my mind, anyway. Um, what I what it that could be, it could have been a rockline road at one point in time, possibly before the ice age or right after the ice age, because right when the ice age stopped and everything just started to melt, the sea levels were much lower than what they are now. They're extremely low. Which we'll probably get into a little bit of that next week, but so that there's a possibility because in the Black Sea, uh, up in some of the Great Lakes and some of the other natural bodies of water, fresh water on the planet, they have found settlements under the water, and the settlements weren't just like flooded and left weren't flooded suddenly. This was for slow rise until they couldn't use the settlement anymore and they had to move back. But on to the topic at hand here, with these ley lines. As you can see, I do believe everywhere there's a black or red circle, there is something of historic significance with each one of those. So now we're going to go into, yep, and we're going to, as I said, what Kaylin just said there, we're going to get into that next week. I'll explain when we're done, when toward the end of this one though, because I want to kind of get through this one. Um, I'm going to go on to map 3, and that kind of brings things into a little bit more of a perspective because this actually shows the curve of the ley lines. Hey Emma, how you doing? There's a lot of black circles there. Whoop, nope. Um, let's see, where's that third one at? Let's go back into share screen. Come on, share this stuff. There we go. And now this one's a little bit more different. Now you can see it's a little bit further off the eastern coast of Florida, but where all those, there's a bunch of different points where everything radiates out. And again, if you look at the line that comes down through Pennsylvania and Ohio, it's that same line. All 3 maps have that same line. So that's kind of like, I wouldn't say my quote unquote criteria, but that shows us there's a similarity in those maps. But a lot of these lines where they intersect that, if you look at the previous map, there's a circle at most of these places where they intersect. Um, Come on, quit doing it. There we go. But I find it very interesting that you got three different maps that are showing sometimes some lines very different than the next one, but still has similarities. As I said, like the line that comes down to Pennsylvania and Ohio. But to go on a little bit further from this, so you kind of get a feel where these things are, um, is a lot of people believe in these to be, especially where they intersect, where they call them either a nexus or a vortice. Where they connect that is supposed to be a place of great healing. Um, yeah, Coral Castle isn't off the coast though. Castle's on the coast. The Bimini Road is just off the coast. So, with that being said, about where these things cross at, like Sedona, Arizona, is a place where a lot of these lines will cross, and a lot of people go do yoga there. It's really good for their chakra. All this, it helps them find balance, which is I wish Cosmic Cultivators was in here because I remember him talking about something not that long ago where he's talking about vibrations. I do believe that these lines give off either a certain vibration or different vibrations or magnify those quote good vibrations, which I do believe he said was 423 hertz or megahertz, which is what radios used to broadcast at. Then they changed to 440, which is it invokes a little bit more of a negative emotion. Where if you got on one of these lines, which is probably closer to 423, it'll invoke a more positive emotion. People believe them to be vortices of magic as well. That one I'm a little bit skeptical on. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I'm skeptical on that. But there could be something with the earth energy as opposed to human energy. Zeus, the human body, or even let's take animals for instance. Anytime something is about to happen, either on top of the earth or in the earth, that is natural, not man made, but natural, like earthquake, or hurricane, stuff that you can't see until it actually happens or know that earthquakes, um, uh, different, how can I put this? Um, a tsunami that's coming in, which would probably be from an earthquake or a landslide. The animals know about it even before they can hear it. They kind of feel it. Exactly. Exactly, Capone. That's what I'm trying to say. And the animals are very sensitive to that. Especially, I'm going to stick with the earthquake. Um, People have noticed before an earthquake, well before an earthquake, the animals will leave the area. They're gone. Same thing with the volcanic eruption. Most of them around Mount St. Helens fled. They left. There were animals that were caught in. Don't get me wrong. Yes, it's the harmonics. That's vibration is a form of harmonics. So they fled. I think when you get on where these lines cross, you get into harmonics. The human body is a little bit more, actually, a lot more sensitive to it than if you were away from one, or if you were just on a line itself and not at a vortex or a nexus. So that's where the whole healing thing, and it's more of a positive harmonic or positive vibration, what have you. There have been cases where people have experienced accelerated physical healing, not accelerated by much, but accelerated healing. Um, some people will say that it was frequency, harmonics, vibrations. You guys know what I'm saying. But with all that being said, people who are psychic claim to have more ability at one of these areas too, which is one reason why I kind of want to talk to exactly Capone. That's why I really wanted to have Courtney here too, because she seems to be really in touch with that. And the ley line going to Ohio, I do believe, runs fairly close to where she lives. So that would be having her here could kind of verify it and get her take on it. And as I said, I wanted to get Chris's take on it too, because he's the one that was talking about frequency and vibrations and harmonics and um all and the different frequencies that they use to broadcast in over the radio. And he could probably shed some light on this as well, because it seems like he's really in tune with that, if you know what I mean. But what I'm going to do here is we're approaching that time, and I'm just going to go ahead and toss the link in here. So if somebody wants to come, up, hey, come on in. Water's fine. I will, Uncle Al. Even though I've read a little bit about, I won't say a bunch, but a little bit about Tesla. There we go. Hey, Uncle Al.
Okay, 1 second. I got problems on my side. Okay, folks, I don't have my phone fully charged, so I can't read your comments. I got the StreamYard only. Um, Diggs is right on the maps, but the only problem is those maps change. Lee lines like a river; it keeps changing, but certain areas in the world has a set course, like the Grand Canyon, it doesn't change. But other rivers like the Mississippi, it's all over the place.
Right.
Ohio and Pennsylvania, where all the sacred mounds are, if you look at them, they're scattered all over. It doesn't make any sense. But if you poke up all the ley lines, they fit because each period of time the earth changes. So the ley line drifts over to that mound and the ley line drifts over to that mound because it's movement. Okay.
Right.
The only ley lines that don't move are the solid ones, like the one they showed in Mexico and also the Bermuda Triangle where the Bimini Road is. You know that road in
And
Bimini?
yeah, the one that that comes out of Mexico. That's one that comes up through Sedona, Arizona, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken.
It has
It,
like 50 lines going through it all over the place. I'm
yeah,
caught in one of the rectangles or triangles. There's 6 in the world. There's the Bermuda Triangle, the Devil's Triangle, and the
it's like,
South Seas of Japan, and most of South China Seas is in the Devil Triangle. You don't want to mess with that. Uh, Everybody loses ships out there, submarines, you name it, every year. And each side are blaming it's the Chinese or it's the Japanese or it's the Koreans because people blame each other for missing ships. Okay.
oh yeah,
On land, it's a lot worse. I live in the Fresno Triangle, a rectangle. Okay. It's like 4 lines chopped into a weird shape. Um, how can you say it? Rectangle. It goes all the way
I,
to the Fresno. It
I
comes
live
down
in a
to
polygon.
what?
I live in a polygon.
Pretty close. It's a rectangle, but square shape. It's like a block. And it goes
Hmm.
all the way down to Los Angeles, cuts over to Las Vegas, goes halfway through Nevada, cuts across again through Bakersfield, and it forms like this weird triangle. And I keep telling people if you're in a plane, do not fly in these areas if you don't have enough power. And people are looking at me, why is that? John Denver, the basketball player, and his daughter, forgot Kobe.
Jack
Okay.
Roush.
Yeah. A lot of
Jack,
people,
even though Jack Roush walked away, I wouldn't say walked away, but he left there alive.
right. But what happens is when these ley line converges, it causes a downdraft hurricane force. So you're flying your little plane or your weak passenger jet. Like, I forget, 20 years ago, we had one crashed into the mountain. They say, we can't pull up, and wham! You could
Yeah.
see it at the night sky. That passenger plane, it had power, but it got caught and slammed into the southern Sierras, killing everybody. Go 300 miles an hour into a mountain. It's not too good. Oh, and before I get sidetracked, everybody's asking me what different forms of ley lines. This is this because Uncle Alan does biohacking. There's different forms of biohacking. This is a kumquat. This is after biohacking. See
Hmm.
the difference?
Yeah.
Because they have kits now that you could do it at home. I'm doing a whole video explaining this later about people are putting chips and devices and chemicals, and they're not doing it at a college or a laboratory. No, they're doing it in the garage or in the kitchen. I'll inject this drug and this steroid, and I could be black. I could be a woman. I could be a werewolf. They're shooting up everything you can imagine with biohacking.
Okay, I'm going to answer one of Emma's questions here. I missed a bunch. Is it better to live near one of the places where a bunch of lines come together, or is it better to be away from them? I would think like especially like a Sedona, Arizona, or the other one that's up north, kind of central United States.
Right.
You'd probably be better off to be living a little bit closer to them because that's more positive energy than you would be living like where you're living at, kind of like in the middle of all this stuff. I thought you were going to say since you live in the Fresno Triangle there, I thought you said I'm in fear of being kidnapped by a hipster.
Yeah. Or this here or something. The good thing is with the Lee lines, it's if you're talking frequency, because Tesla back in 1907 wrote this big paper. I'm still reading half of it. It's over 1,000 pages about
Hmm.
frequencies, harmonics, and the Earth crust. Because he was the guy who's trying to put power into the um,
Atmosphere.
atmosphere, and he did it in Colorado on top of a ley line, and people were seeing like there's lightning coming out of the ground onto the sky. That was Tesla pumping in millions of watts of electricity,
Yep.
and his experiments are way ahead of his time. Up until 1943, when he died, the government seized everything he wrote on frequencies and harmonics because people were scared of Tesla. Not the car, the scientist, because he was way ahead of the time. He'd invented death rays that the Japanese copied, and that's where you get microwave ovens from Tesla.
Hmm.
Isn't that weird?
Oh
Death
yeah.
ray
Well,
and microwave oven. Great.
here's the funny thing. Um, Tesla's theory of resonance. Did you know the MythBusters proved that?
Oh yeah, they almost shook down a bridge and they had to stop. The
Do you know what?
little
The little merchant guys that only went up one side of the cable. You know which bridge that was?
yes, I think it was in Ohio, wasn't it?
No, that was the Golden Gate Bridge. They
Oh,
almost crashed. I'm like, oh, that's
because
well, here we go.
right, because a resonator, what it does, it finds the um, harmonics of the molecules of the bridge, and once they do that, the bridge just shakes apart. Now with
Well,
uh,
the,
fre-
the other thing with resonance, though, go ahead.
go ahead. With frequency, with
Actually,
electromagnetic, you had a question?
no, I was telling you to go ahead, then you kind of froze on me. So I'm like, okay,
Okay,
where are we at?
sorry. On like the microwave gun that the Japanese learned, because they learned this from the Germans how to detect planes, but they found out after reading Tesla's paper on frequencies, they could kill people. They had a film of they shot a monkey at 30 feet and the monkey disappeared. It just went poof. Here's the monkey running in the circle, and you see like Godzilla type death ray and Zappo. And they used to do it on Russians and Americans. This one guy said he saw his friend just disappear, just went poof. That's frequency because that's electromagnetic waves. Back to Lee lines. Lee lines cover everything from harmonics, that's from the ground. That's how you get your weird feelings on earthquakes.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't covered infrasounds. That's another form of ley line. You hear that weird noise everybody was talking about 10 years ago, that booming or horn sound or that bell sound or whispering, or they hear that. That's
Right.
also part of ley lines. I do warn people that, like Emma asked earlier about if you live near one of the places, it depends if it's a positive charged connection or it's a negative charge connection, like the ones that going through. Where's that coal fire? I keep forgetting in Pennsylvania.
Centralia, but
Centralia.
there's not there's not one going through that one now.
Yeah, it burnt out. It drifted. It's still burning.
It's
It's still going the other way. It's following the
well,
coal veins.
I know that. The whole thing about it is the ley line actually skipped over that.
Right.
But I think what that is a negative vortex that the ley line would. It's kind of like because the line that comes down through Pennsylvania and into Ohio is one of those quote unquote positive lines, and that's kind of like I wouldn't say negative, but it's like one of those places that it was like either it's going to be on one side of it or it's going to be on the other side of it. If it tries to land on it, it's kind of like trying to put two poles of a magnet together.
Magnet.
It's just going to skip over and keep on going.
Yeah. That's the problem with ley lines. You don't know if you got a positive or negative charge. Now, I'm reading the part about page 500 that Tesla says if you take a metallic washer, like steel or something, or zinc or whatever alloy, and you put a thin layer of copper on it. I want to test it out on Diggs when he goes sees the ceremonial site. Wear it around your neck with a silver chain and tell me what happens if you're affected by the harmonics or vibration or frequency. And if you poof, please record it. Because I was trying to get one of my
I
friends
may
to
just
do
be that.
that with the disc. I made a disc, I had it all set up. We'll just put it around your neck. You drive to Sedona and see what happens. He chickened out. He went
See,
to Vegas
Sedona,
instead. because it's
tried
so
using
up.
the coin
Now we're
and the
freezing.
coin off. Yeah. Um, the other thing I was going to say about resonance, though, you ever see the experiment with the metronomes?
Yeah.
And I
The
think that is, yeah, I watched like 4 or 5 different experiments with those, and all of them came up with the same result. They start at different times and different speeds and everything else, and by the time everything's said and done,
going in the
they're
same direction.
they're going the same direction in unison until they come to a stop. But when you start them off, they're going every which.
It's
They
what
kind of make they make their own resonance as they go, and one like two will match. Don't bring another one in. Don't bring. Then pretty soon they're all just
now what you don't want to see is two of them in resonance all of a sudden goes like this. They switch. And that's the scary part because that means it's unstable. Some guy we're trying to prove Coral Castle because remember you're talking about the Bimini Road? It runs right
mhm,
through Coral Castle, that ley line. And the guy who was there, been studying the Egyptians and stuff, he built that whole place with a little box, a tripod, and a truck. And he lifted 2.5 ton boulders by himself. And he was
mhm.
no bigger than me. And I'm like, okay, this guy doesn't have a crane or a tractor. Tractors back then in the 20s couldn't even lift 2 tons. And this guy was pushing it around. They seen one guy said he lifted up with his bare hands and a pulley and a chain and he shoved it on the truck and the truck went
Right.
yeah, that's scary, isn't it?
That's scary, and also shows that he figured out how to use a ley line to create anti gravity.
Kind of. It's like the Egyptians. I keep telling them that's one of the secrets of the pyramids, harmonics, because they got lazy and they switched to Legos because one of their cities is totally built out of smaller Lego sized blocks. It's like Legos. They have a little joint on them,
Mhm.
and they say, "Why chop the hell out of a two
Hey,
ton
Tammy.
stone while we can make these high Tammy these little blocks and we could build a whole city? And if we don't like the area or something goes wrong, just disassemble it and just rebuild it." There's one city on the Nile that's been rebuilt back and forth over the centuries because I don't like the scenery here. Let's move. And they moved. They picked up the whole city, put it on barges, and went down to another part of the river, set up the city, and they did it for over 1,000 years with Legos.
I just wonder how many pharaohs complained about stepping on them.
A lot. I wonder how many people from the Jewish persuasion saying, Moses, get us out of here. I don't want to be picking up Legos all my life. It's a bad holiday joke, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's Easter. Okay, folks, but
Um,
the big thing is on ley lines, you have to be very careful. A lot of maps are outdated because ley lines are like a river. They still haven't figured it out. They cause a lot of problems. And some people figured out they could extend their lives or they could see the future or they could do a whole bunch of things. I do warn people do not try this at home. Okay. Because I know friends of mine who says, I'm going into the woods and I'll figure out what's going on with the ley lines. And then years later, I think that's his car. And you
no.
find the car, it's all covered in brush and stuff. I don't think you found Bigfoot because also
No.
with the ley lines, you find weird creatures near them, like Bigfoot, skinwalkers, werewolves, Wendigo. You just follow it, these lines, the negative ones, and then you
Mhm.
have sightings of all these weird creatures on them, like Mothman. What's the other one in New Jersey and Pennsylvania? I forgot the one in
Jersey,
Pennsylvania.
Jersey
They got
Devil.
the Jersey Devil, and the one that came out of Pennsylvania has a weird shaped leaf in back of his head, that big
Yeah,
eyes.
that was from West Virginia.
That's West Virginia. I
Not
can't
the far,
remember what
the
was
far, Woods monster. It kind of looks like he had the ace of spades behind his head.
Right, right. Yeah, it is West Virginia. I can't
That
remember what was Pennsylvania. Was it the Owl Man with the big eyes?
I think it was the Green Man. We were talking about him the last time. The Green
Right,
Man.
right,
And the thing with the Green Man is he was a real dude. He lived in Pittsburgh,
right.
and it
Um,
a lot of just real quick with the Green Man. There's like a lot of folklore that never happened. He got electrocuted, got jaundice, and turned green.
right.
That's what his story is. Um, that's because he flat out told me since I was careless. So it was his own dumb fault. That
Right. But now with biohacking, you could change any color of your skin. You want it to be
Mhm.
black, Asian, pink, green, purple. They did an example of remember those tobacco plants and tomato plants? They turn green and glow in the dark. It was like
Yeah,
10 years ago. Remember those glowing plants? Some idiot in Berkeley injected himself with one of those solutions, and now he glows kind of a off yellow. It wasn't green, but glowing yellow man. And that's not a
I,
racial comment, folks. He looks like orange, or I mean not orange, lemon. He looks like a lemon glowing in the dark.
he's probably
At
hit
least,
at the rave though.
yeah, probably. but but I have to warn people on ley lines. Ley lines is a fascinating subject. It's kind of presto science because nobody did real research other than Tesla. Tesla did a lot of research on it, and the government
Mhm.
stole half his papers on it. Because I'm reading one
Right.
paper where they were still talking about frequency, harmonics, resonance, all that. And he's telling people that if you figure out this, you control the world. So I
Oh
guess
wow.
somebody, okay.
I'll be right back. Just keep going. I'll be right back in like 30 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, true. True, Capone cabin. You don't want that to happen in your backyard. Okay. And I keep warning people if you mess around, there's a lot of devices in old myths and stuff. Like somebody brought an Anka, the Egyptian sign of life, to Stonehenge, and he got electrocuted on broad daylight. They couldn't figure out where the thunderbolt came from. He wore it around his neck. It was copper, solid copper. Walked into Stonehenge, and boom. So you don't want to be screwing around with stuff or get eaten by, you know, gee, that looks like a giant owl or a chicken or God knows what just jumped out of nowhere, and which is kind of what Capone says on Indiana Jones when you open up a Ouija board or the Ark of Combit. That's another thing I'm trying to figure out. I think that was one of the devices they used. Kind of, they were trying to contact God, but the Ark of the Covenant sounds like a battery or some device, a condenser to tap the energy from the ley lines. Because you remember Indiana Jones and the
Yeah.
Raiders of
Oh
the
yeah.
Lost Ark? Yeah, the
Hmm.
Nazis were really big interested in ley lines, and they did a lot of research on it. And they, again, America and Russia took all the paperwork because what the Germans discovered scared the hell out of them.
I did have a little bit with the Ark of the Covenant. I do believe the ley line part of it. I also believe that they had probably some of the first and actually more potent versions of the Baghdad battery in them as well. And when you got over the ley lines, it kind of supercharged them. Makes sense?
Yeah. There's
Because
another
they said
trick.
if go ahead. I was going to say because if you follow where they took the Ark of the Covenant back in the Bible, they were always going down the ley line,
Right.
always.
Now, this
So
is a
and that
simple trick. Go ahead.
just to finish off what I was saying, which goes to say that if somebody touched it, it was instant death.
Okay. Now, people, you don't need an Ark of a Convent because We're modern and we're idiots, and we strung power lines all over the place. Some of these big power structures have clashed with ley lines. If you want to see something really interesting, take a fluorescent bulb, non plugged, rub it once with a woolen cloth, and you stand near the power line, and the thing will light up. This is a trick. Everybody could do it. Diggs
Mm-hmm.
could go out there and do it and hold it like, damn, this is lighting up really quick. This what happens when power lines intersect with ley lines. They get supercharged. Like, gee, my power bill's down, but where are we getting all the power? It's between 9 and 4, and all of a sudden, power like zoom because it hits these lines. And if we have a thunderstorm like New York did back in '68, where it followed that line, and that line, every one of the towers melted.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the '68 power failure? Every one
Mm-hmm.
of those towers failed because it was a lesser used line, but they had to use it. And the guys in all the power plants says no, because the big secret is that's why there's a wire running around New York. A lot of people don't know this. It's a true urban myth. There is a copper wire running around New York for two reasons. If that wire breaks, oh boy. All
Yeah.
right. It's in a negative zone. It's New York City. If that wire breaks, it's like, oh God, what was that glow in the East Coast? Did the Russians bomb New York? No. Some idiot cut that line because it happened only twice in this last century, and all hell broke loose in New York. And you go back and read the historical records.
Well, I think
Uh,
the second time that something happened to it was what, about 1978, 79, because it took the whole East Coast with it.
yeah, it did. And also, it screwed up the early computers in New York. It just fried everything. Like, wait, the stock. Remember, you couldn't even figure out what stocks were selling because everything went down. It just bloop.
Yeah, localized magnetic pulse. Boom.
Yeah. So, like I said, folks, that's why I tell people never live in New York. Go away. Like Washington, D.C., go away. Because, again, the copper line around the District Columbia, it's been cut several times and a lot of weird things happened to it. And this was planted back in, I forgot, the right before the invasion of the capital in 1812 or
The
11.
1812 was the Spanish American War. I think it was right
No,
before.
1812 was British invading Washington D.C. The Spanish War was 1898, and Mexican War was 1848.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. You're right. You're right.
Okay, the British was coming; they were going to kill the Americans, and then one of them, why the Americans put this fine copper wire in the ground? So they chopped it up for good King George was, or whatever George was, and they were going to ship it back. Next day, they were hit by lightning, a tornado. Tornadoes do hit Washington. The
Oh yeah.
biggest one they seen. Their ship was wrecked by a hurricane. They had an earthquake, and they set fire to Washington D.C. Does that sound normal to you? They burnt the White
Dude.
House. No. So,
Oh,
like I said, folks, if your city has a copper wire around it, run away from that city. Like screaming, waving your hands. It's worse than a nuclear bomb.
uh,
Yeah, it was the Kalen's right. It was the British American War, 1812. There's also a short war, only lasts a year.
yeah. The British kind of found out in the late 1770s, like, you don't mess with us, and they came back for another year, and it's like, what were we thinking? What, why? Why were we doing this?
Right, but part of it was um, they didn't want us to get involved with Napoleon, and so they wanted to keep us busy while they were chasing Napoleon all over the continent. That was the main reason for that war. Because can you imagine the
Mhm.
French and the Americans joining forces against England? That'd change the whole history, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and well, the thing about it is, if you go into the Civil War, the British were fighting a proxy war with the United States, mainly the North, through the South.
Right. But
Which,
unfortunately, go ahead.
which, if you actually look at the Civil War, why the Civil War was fought, everybody will tell you it was slavery. Slavery was actually an afterthought in all this. The war was fought. Abraham Lincoln literally invaded the South over money. And the reason they invaded over money was England was giving the South better prices than the North was. And it's also like, you know what? If they're going to give us better, we're going to shop with them. We're not going to shop with you. And they wanted to secede from the United States during this time because they thought the North was giving them a bad deal. So that now the North is not getting the South's money. If the North did not invade the South over money, the United States would still be split on a Mason-Dixon line.
Right. And also, another thing is the lee lines that were going across it. The
Mm-hmm.
North at that time had lesser, except for certain tribal areas. And the North realized that the British wants to make a facto government with the South, take over Cuba, and because they own Virgin Islands and everything around there.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine Cuba, the South, the British? It's like, well, we'll make you a protectorate of England. And then the South would be, oh, they're civilized people. And the only thing that came up, go ahead.
I was going to say there is one other territory everybody seems to forget that was British controlled: Canada. Which the other thing that they'd have to do to really actually, if they really want to put it to the North, the Union Army, start sailing right across the Great Lakes because you've got all of Canada to deal with too. So you've got the North on two sides.
Right. And another thing is all Canadian cities are on the border of United States. All right. That's a reason why, because it's another lee line again. If you trace all the Canadian cities by hooking it all up, except for Montreal, that's a whole different fish. But Montreal and
Quebec,
Quebec,
Quebec itself is a whole different fish.
yeah, I know. But if you hook everything up, it's a lee line. You just go across, and it look like, good grief. It's like you go follow the eastern side up to the Great Lakes, and then once it gets past the Mississippi, it's random lee lines, but all the lee lines it matches up with Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, what you call it, um, Iowa. It's like
In
Illinois.
Indiana,
Yeah, it just
Indiana,
fits. Yeah, it just fits everything perfectly, and people are wondering that's not normal, isn't it?
yeah, like I said, having two in a row is kind of happenstance. You can do that with just about any site on the planet. Having three in a row, that's a coincidence. When you start getting four or more, now you're looking at a trend.
Yeah.
So
Capone Cabin made two comments that are correct. Alfred Wat- Alfred Watkins penned the old straight track because at that time he thought the lee
yeah,
lines were like a railroad track.
and I was reading the wiki at the beginning of this, so that's. I don't know if you heard me read that at the beginning of this or not, or but that is what started all of this in the 1920s. Plus, what the Germans did, I think I saw the Wikipedia page up, but is a German name, but is Holy Lines.
Hmm.
So it kind of goes; those two kind of go hand in hand. And I think what happened is the in the 1960s, they kind of took a handful of this, a handful of that, went,
Yeah. But folks, you got to understand. I keep telling this to people, but nobody ever listens to old Uncle Al. 1922 and 1926 is time period points where everybody's thinking. Remember, before that was like Victorian, Edwardian. Everybody wore stovepipe hats, had stiff colors, collars, and they wore suits and vests and like poo poo at everybody. And now they all changed. What are we wearing today? Polo shirts, t-shirts. We're not wearing top hat. Well, I do sometimes, but
see it, Ted?
yeah. But and also it's top of the hour, and I gotta get ready for Courtney's. Is it six
Yeah,
thirty?
so 9:30, nine
Nine.
thirty Eastern, nine
Yeah.
thirty Eastern Standard Time. But
Right.
there's a couple things I kind of want to go over here real quick, off topic of this, but I'm going to be having a fishing debate on Friday night. I'm going to be sending out invites for that. One person I'm going to try sending an invite out to, I'm going to ask him first before I just send it, is I don't know if you ever heard of Mike Iaconelli. You're a Nike fan. So I'm going to send one out to him because I've been listening to his podcast. I love his podcast. So, and I'm going to, and it's some of the other people. Like I think I'm going to have Bruce come in for like a law enforcement perspective, and a few other people like Backlash, First Time Fishing Adventures, and maybe a couple other people. I'd like to have like at least four people there so we can actually have a debate. Whether Mike shows up or not, that's a long shot. But what's the worst he can say? No.
That'd be a great live stream, folks. Check it out. A lot of fishing channels, they talk about the spot, how big the fish was. I like the fishing channel where they screw up and get eaten by the gator. Like that one bass fisherman, he stuck his hand in the water and the gator
Yeah.
took the fish in his hand. Ah!
Well, a lot of fishing channels that I watch, not really how big the fish was, they go through techniques. Watch like Mike's channel. Mike Iaconelli has a channel, Art the Foe. I watch a lot of tactical bassing. That guy, well, he'll sit there, he'll take a half hour, he'll show you the bait, he'll do you a breakdown why he's using the bait, what the water clarity is, what the water temperature is. So it's one of the, it's he gives you the science of it. And honestly, one person I have to credit for that is do you remember who Bill Dance was?
Kind of. Haven't
He
seen him
was
for a while.
he's still on the outdoor channel. It's still
Hmm.
I think it's like 30 or 40 some years now making television shows. But he was one of the first ones who actually brought science into this, not just a gut feeling or whatever, and figured out the science of why they bite, what and where they're going to be in the water column, what structures during what time of year. He actually put a scientific spin on it and help the biologists figure it out. So, like most of the fishing that you see now, like in the tournaments, a lot of that stuff, even though he doesn't get credit for it, was brought forth by Bill Dance and put forth to the public.
Right, because Bill Vance also did like sonar, water gauging, that's temperature
Yep.
of different levels. He did all
Mm-hmm.
that back in, I forget, 70s and 60s and 80s.
70s into the 80s.
Right.
Um, Another person that picked up on it and was helping Bill Dance was Hank Parker. So, I mean, that, but I better shut this off because I'm going to Courtney's too. So,
Yeah. I'll catch you later, folks.
okay. Hey, you all have a good night. And I'll talk to y'all later. Love y'all. Okay, and we will end this.